2, 3, 4, let's go.
It's Heartbeat.
It's a fabulous show.
Alaska.
I Heartbeat Alaska.
It's Heartbeat. Alaska.
Pull up a chair and enjoy the show.
Hear it from Sitka to Barrow. Gather around for Jeannie's show. It's the Aleutian, the Indian, and the Eskimo. It's the Aleutian, the Indian, and the Eskimo.
Welcome one, welcome all.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heartbeat Alaska Native News and Native Information. I'm Jeannie Green. We travel now to the exotic, remote Aleutian Islands, where the people there have a history of over 5,000 years. One of the most interesting aspects of the Aleutians, that even though they are really remote, they're sort of the crossroads of the world. Rugged, windblown, majestic. The Aleutian Islands are an ever-changing crossroads, mountaintops sticking out of the sea. The islands mark the boundary between the Pacific Ocean and the Bering Sea. It's the birthplace of storms. The islands are also a crossroads of the Earth's crust. They include 57 volcanoes straddling the line where the Pacific and the North American tectonic plates grind together. Almost every day, somewhere along the Aleutian chain, tremors shake the Earth. Though most of these tremors are too small to notice, it is one of the most geologically active places on the planet. Volcanic eruptions are commonplace. The islands are a crossroads for animals. They contain the largest concentration of marine mammals in the world. More seabirds nest here on these islands than in the rest of the whole United States combined. The wealth of fish that come from the sea here make up one of the largest fisheries in the world. The islands are also a crossroads of people.
We have long-standing roots here, thousands of years.
Dave Osterback is the president of the Shongan-Taigunan tribe.
One anthropologist believes that the Aleuts who have lived in the Shumagins and the Aleutians are one of the longest recorded groups ever studied.
That is to say, that Aleuts were well established here back when the pyramids were being built in ancient Egypt. Aleut culture is one of the oldest cultures in the world. All over these islands, the subtle clues of times long past wait to be discovered.
There's evidence of where Aleutians lived on all these islands. Just about any place you go, you can find the impressions in the ground where the Brabras were built.
The Aleutians were some of the first of Alaska's natives to see this. Appearing through the fog, a boat like no one had ever seen before. When the Russians first landed on the Aleutians in 1741, America was still just a group of 13 English colonies. Half a world away, there was an estimated 12 to 15,000 Aleutians living on these islands. Over the next 60 years, disease, enslavement, and warfare would leave the Aleutians almost extinct. In 1800, there were only around 1,200 left. Across Europe and America, furs were the height of fashion. The seals and sea otters that crowded these islands were a gold mine to Russian traders. The Russian government appealed for fair treatment of the natives, but the Russian government was far away. Greed and competition among the fur traders was the reality. The only place the Aleutians found any real solace was here, the Russian Orthodox Church. Church leaders worked hard to translate scripture into Aleut and appealed for more humane treatment of these proud people. Over the past 100 years, the fishing industry exploded across the Aleutians. It seems every village in the region has the biggest and best of something. King Cove has the biggest single processing plant. Sandpoint claims the largest fishing fleet. And Dutch Harbor is America's #1 fishing port. The islands became a crossroads of cultures with Scandinavians, Americans, and Aleutians living, working, and starting families together.
My grandparents, on my grandmother's side, they come from a village called Belkoski, and nobody lives there anymore, but that's west of us here, about 70 miles. And she was a full-blooded Aleut, and she married my grandfather, who was a full-blooded Finn. So I'm Aleut and Finn, and a lot of folks in town here are half Aleut and half Norwegian or Finn or Dane or something, you know.
This is George McGlashen, a respected elder from Akutan Island. He remembers the whaling station here, the only one in the Aleutians.
Now that's what we were growing up on around, whale. Go up the whaling station, weekends. See how they were doing it. Sometimes we're going to the galley and have something to eat.
Akutan is about 35 miles east of Dutch Harbor. The village of Akutan clings to the shoreline of one of the most active volcanoes in Alaska. Though the whaling station is just a memory, Trident Seafoods operates a huge plant here now. There are 75 people living in the village, but the plant often has over 300 people living and working there. Like many villages in the Aleutians, Akutan was formed when a number of villages in the area combined into one. The Aleutians are some of the most remote places on the planet, and Akutan is no exception. Besides on a ship, the only way to get here is this. It's one of the last Grumman Gooses in use as a commercial airliner. Though it's about 50 years old, the Goose does its job very well. It lands in the water and then drives up and parks on land. The plane is a working reminder of the World War II era. The World War II era is a time that the elders in Akutan rarely talk about. 200 years after the first Russian ship landed on the Aleutians, the bombs came. In the early days of the summer of 1942, Japan bombed Dutch Harbor and took over Attu and Kiska Islands. Once again, events half a world away would drastically shape the fate of the Aleut people. The Aleuts on Attu were taken to Japan as prisoners of war. The rest of the Aleuts would suffer a similar fate, except at the hands of their own countrymen.
No, there was no war. And we weren't allowed to take anything. Oh, and even with cameras, we took cameras away from them.
The Aleuts were evacuated from their homes and allowed to take only what they could carry. They climbed aboard ships and watched their homes fade into the distance, wondering when they would ever see them again. The people of Atka watched as U.S. servicemen burned their village down so the Japanese couldn't use the buildings if they took over the island. For over 4,000 years, the Aleuts made these islands home. Now, for the first time, these islands lay deserted. George McGlashen's father owned the store in Akutan. And when Akutan was evacuated, his father took all the food from the store with him. A smart move, because in the evacuation camps, food was sparse. Conditions in the relocation camps in southeast Alaska were deplorable. During their first 3 years there, almost everyone got sick and many died. The public knew little of the plight of the people the government was saving from a Japanese invasion that never came. Posed photographs like this one showed an idealistic life that simply did not exist. George was a young boy when he was evacuated. Like many in the camps, he and his family longed to get out. His sisters did. They now live in Seattle. He hasn't seen them in decades, an ongoing legacy of a long-ago war. When the Aleuts returned to their abandoned homes after 3 years, many were ramshackled and looted by American GIs looking for souvenirs and valuables. The Aleuts cleaned, the Aleuts rebuilt, the Aleuts persevered. In the decades following the war, fishing became king. With new markets, new fisheries, and more efficient production, people here started making lots of money. Sandpoint, Alaska. For a time, this little community had one of the highest per capita incomes in the country.
Prices were very good, especially for salmon at that time. This is before farm salmon came in and turned everything upside down, so there was a lot of money flowing through the town here, and young people as well as the adults made a lot of money during the summer, and which carried over, you know, in the winter months, and people moved around a lot. You know, they traveled, went on vacations, and had a lot of nice things, and all that changed. And it changed because of state and federal regulations, from the State Board of Fish to the North Pacific Council, North Pacific Fishery Management Council. All of those new regulations impacted us tremendously. And a lot of regulations nowadays from the federal government are made to benefit the larger fleet than they do the smaller fleet. The problem with that is these small coastal communities are basically comprised of fishing boats that don't exceed 58 feet. The prices of boats, the prices of permits lost their value tremendously. And so a guy today, if I wanted to get out of the fishery, who would I sell my boat to? Because they take a look at my operation and they say, you know, they want to know how much money I make with it, and, you know, how lucrative a fishery is. Is it worth me getting into it? You know, can I buy your package for, you know, $250,000 or $500,000 and make the payments and live your lifestyle? Not in a heartbeat. You couldn't do it. It just wouldn't happen. So we're stuck with them, whether we want them or not. You know, the banks don't want them. You know, people don't want to buy them.
But like many families out here, the Osterbacks are hanging on. Dave loves living here, and on evenings like this, it's easy to see why.
Hey, Boots, what you doing?
We've been here for, you know, thousands of years with our Aleut ancestry. We love living here. It's a good place to raise a family.
Anyway, this is the smokehouse and the drying house right here. I don't have a lot in here right now, but I do have some in here that we're drying. We dry them, and then I take them and I cut them and put them in freezer bags and put them in the freezer for the winter, and we eat them with seal oil or muktuk, olla. Pink salmon here. They're usually the darker pinks, and we just rinse them out with seawater, and you'll see a little pepper. We put a little pepper on them, kind of keeps the flies away, and then we just put them in here. We cut them, and so the air gets to them, and then we just let them hang until we can hang them all winter like that if you want. This is a smokehouse where I can put about 150, 200 smoked fish in there. Usually I smoke pretty much sockeye and chum salmon, some pinks. These are silver salmon, coho salmon. Very hard to smoke because they're very soft. They're doing a lot of feeding, so they're hard to smoke. You know, I cure them for 3 hours, and then I try and I cut them thin, and then we smoke dry them. And but they're still very difficult for me to deal with. And I use cottonwood when I smoke my fish. It's a long time home recipe for my grandparents. My grandparents lived on an island called Wasnesensky, about 36 miles southwest of here, and they lived on there for about 100 years, and they smoked and cured everything that they had. They have their own cattle down there, about 75 head of white-faced cattle, and they smoked and dried a lot of fish, and they sold a lot of their smoked fish to the different communities.
This is Dick Jacobsen. He and his family are also struggling with an impossible fishing economy. Now, instead of taking nets out of his boat, he's taking tourists. He runs a Shumagon Island charter boat company. He's hoping the lure of these majestic, unspoiled islands will bring visitors and a cash flow.
To the starboard side or the right side is Unga Island. Off to the left is Pop-Off. Pop-Off Island is where Standpoint is located. This group of islands right here is what's known as Shumagon Island Group. Unga Island is one of the bigger ones where Squaw Harbor and Unga are at. there were a bunch of smaller little settlements where people lived in codfish out of it. Pop-Off Island is one right next to it where Sandpoint is at. One next to that is Corvin. There was Corvin village out there, and there was another village on the other side. Next one is Andronica, and this long one here is Nagai Island. And then you get on the outside, and there's Bird Island and China Burrow, Siminoff, and Little Canuji and Big Canuji, and like I said, there's quite a few. I don't know exactly how many.
The cast of characters for today's show include the gorgeous Sunshine, stellar sea lions, and fin whales. Dick positions the boat to get a better view.
We were figuring they were all
The bottom of the boat, maybe. Big thing. Oh, yeah, that's a big. Three of them. Look how big they are.
cool.
After the whales surface, they breathe 3 or 4 times, then dive straight downward, flipping their huge tails out of the water before they disappear. They often dive to depths of 400 feet, feeding on plankton and fish.
Come on.
During the period of time that I was growing up, it switched from a trap operation to a individual fishing operation, and gradually become very efficient, and fishermen did fairly well in this area. And since mid-'80s, it's gradually started to decline because of the value of fish. The volume of fish are pretty much still available, but the value of fish has really changed. I mean, at a given time, we got paid upwards of $3.50 a pound for reds, and right now we're getting 52. Plus a couple of little incentive things like for raw chilled seawater and things like that. But you can see the difference, and you know, maybe you would be able to adapt to some lower prices and things like that, but the actual cost of the operation hasn't got less as the price went down. It's got more.
After watching the whales for a while, Dick and his family make their way back to Sandpoint's harbor. They need to get ready. There's a wedding in town tonight. As the sun sets, folks make their way out to Muscle Point. There is no stretch limo here, no fancy dresses, just family and friends coming to witness a new beginning. Whatever happens with the struggling fishing economy out here, one thing is clear. The Aleuts who have been here for over 4,000 years will find a way to survive and prosper. They always have. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Heartbeat Alaska Native News, Native Information. I'm Jeannie Green. It's a pleasure to bring this program to you. Congratulations, Charles and Alice Bowens, on your marriage. God bless every one of you. Join me again, won't you, next week for more Heartbeat Alaska.